Good morning, everybody. My name is Wayne Patterson. Now, I live in Australia and I work for a company called Chimit Group. Now, for some years now, we've been carrying out research and development on aeration in grains in Australia. And the reason for that is that Australia was starting to develop some insect resistance down around Victoria and southern New South Wales, also down in the Mallee, which meant that it would have become impossible to use phosphines to kill insects. Now, the reason for that is that it was resistance caused by overuse in phosphines. So we started to research the use of aeration in grains in order to combat some problems that we had in long-term storage. And one of those problems was moisture migration. The other one, of course, was insect resistance. There were several other problems around that, and that shrinkage was another issue that we had to try and combat on the way through. So what we did was that we joined forces with several of the major grain storers in Australia, GrainCorp, Viterra, and a few of the others. And we came up with, over a period of 5 or 6 years, some aeration protocols that meant to say that we could now eliminate the losses, particularly in bunker storage. Now, to give you an idea, Australia would store about 75% of its total production in grain bunkers. They're starting to swing a little now with silos coming into farm use, but what we're seeing now is that most of our major grain producers or grain storers are storing most of the crop in bunker storage, and losses were experienced throughout that. So in this presentation, you'll see that there are lots of photos here. Now, I haven't done this in video. I have done it in still photos. That I've done an aeration over the top, so you can give an idea of what we're talking about. So basically, a bunker is a set of walls, either concrete or steel, and in fact, we can build them without walls. It's not the walls that actually make the bunker, it's the aeration. Now, why do we build bunkers instead of silos? Cost. We can build bunkers for, well, to give you an idea, around $20 to $27 a metric ton initial buy cost, where a silo is up around $110 to $120 a metric ton initial buy cost. Massive saving. And when it comes to building storage in particular, your dollar goes so much further with bunkers. So as I said earlier, it's not so much the bunker that we're aiming for in storage, the walls and the tarps and whatnot. It's the aeration that operates within that system that keeps the grain healthy. So you can see by looking at this, okay, you've just taken some look at some bunker wall and some tarps. What we have here is aeration ducting. Now that ducting is poly. It's fabricated to the specification of each fan. So each poly duct is drilled out and fabricated to match each fan. And one thing that you will notice about the poly ducting in particular, which is why I'm stopping to talk about it, is that the poly ducting, being poly, is very durable. It's balanced spigot. There are no seals, there are no bolts to lose. It just slides into each other. Easily disassembled as the bunker is coming apart, and in fact, most operators disassemble the aeration unit using a chain or a rope to pull the pipe apart. The pipe can be purchased in either 3 metre or 6 metre lengths. It can be stored outside in off-season. It's a very durable product. So as you can see here, as we go through this, and the next photo that comes up, this will give you an idea of the fan sizing. These fans stand around 6 feet tall, producing 20,000 litres of air every second of operation. And we aim for about 10 air changes per hour in a stack. And that's very, very important as we run aeration plants. So you can see here some of these fans were placed on trailers and whatnot. I'm going to leave you for a minute to have a look at these photos, and I'm just going to go on now and talk a little bit more about air changes and why we actually aerate grain and what we achieve. As I said earlier, we're aiming for about 10 air changes per hour in a stack by adding fans to that stack. Now, what we're doing is that we can reduce moisture in a stack over a long period of time, and we can now actually eliminate grain dryers. Grain dryers are very dangerous things to use because we are superheating the grain, which causes the grain being held in storage, causes the grain to continue to heat up, continue to be warm, which causes shrinkage. Loss of moisture within the grain is a major issue. And with aeration, what we try and do is add moisture. We can do that very effectively through the grain controllers that we have available. We can also take moisture out over a period of time. Now, where that's really valuable is that you can harvest wet grain. You can put grain in a stack of 100,000 tonnes if you want. But at the end of the day, if we're running 10 air changes an hour, we can control that stack as far as moisture is concerned, and you won't get rot. Grain will not rot as long as air is running through it. And the whole idea is management. We want to be able to manage the moisture down in that stack so that if we're bringing it in at 16, 17, 18% moisture, but we want to sell it at 12% moisture, then we can manage that moisture down very slowly until we get it to the point where we can now sell it when we want to, simply by using the fans, controlling the fans on and off. The same can be said vice versa. We can actually add moisture to grain now, and the reason why we can do that is that a grain is a living, breathing organism, and as long as it breathes, it will pull moisture in, lock it within the grain, and effectively fatten it. That's a little bit about aeration. One of the major things that we do with oilseed with aeration is to prevent carbonation. In other words, once fatty acid gets out of control in storage in particular, what will happen is it will take a catalyst, and that usually is just a little bit of moisture, and the grain will burn. And that's simply because the fatty acid is out of control in the grain. So therefore, aeration is very, very important. But what we're looking at here is different types of infilling equipment, whether we're filling from the center of the bunker or the outside of the bunker. And as you go through these pictures, you'll see how we do that. There's a couple of shots I want to highlight that are coming up at the moment that we will stop and talk about as the time comes. So as you can see, and I know that as we saw oilseeds, as we saw cottonseed, as we saw wheat, barley, oats, particularly malting barleys, aeration is a very important component of that. So if we look at this next shot, you will see some aeration duct in the bottom of that and the shot coming up. So you can actually get a bit of a look at where the aeration duct is and where the tarps actually sit on the bunkers, as you will note there as you go through. Now it's not the shot coming up, but it's the next one after it. Now, as we get there and it's moving towards it now, I'll explain this to you. Now, this shot, as it appears, is a cottonseed bunker. Have a look at the tarp lock that we're getting with cottonseed in that stack. Now, as we run into, this is a running diesel fan on a fan. You can see the tarp lock there as well, and you can have a look at that. Now, this next shot is interesting. This is a silo. And what you can see in that silo is the moisture migration within the silo. And this is what aeration stops. Now, we don't only get moisture migration from the walls of the silo, we also get moisture migration from the walls and the tarpaulins in bunkers. And this is why aeration is so important, because we are generating heat underneath the tarp and in the walls of the silo. And the whole idea is the aeration actually gets rid of that moisture, keeps the grain healthy, stops it from rotting. It's an important tool that if we're storing grain, we should not discount the use of. Okay, thanks very much for listening to me. My name is Wayne Patterson. If you go to www.tumitgroup.com.au, you'll see our website there.